It's snowing in New Orleans. So I felt like today would be the appropriate and perfect time to talk about the snowmen of New Orleans. That's right, the gang called the Snowmen that used to be in New Orleans in the 1990s. Very rare do we ever see snow in New Orleans, and it's also very rare to hear me talk about the snowmen of New Orleans. And today, on this episode of The Pen and the Shank, I'm going to tell you about one of the most notorious gangs that ever held the streets on the outskirts of New Orleans, a bunch of white boys called the Snowmen. That's right. We're going to go back to the 1990s. Now, if you can picture the scene in the 1990s, of course, New Orleans was already a very bloody city. It was a city that was the projects in New Orleans and the neighborhoods on the outskirts of New Orleans that, were known to have a lot of violence, a lot of drug activity, and a lot of boom, boom, boom. Dudes were getting their brains knocked loose and they wasn't coming home. Dudes were going in and out of prison from juvenile detention all the way to adult. A lot of juveniles were going straight to adult prison back in the 90s in New Orleans. Now, there was this group of guys in the outskirts of New Orleans in a place called Metairie, Louisiana, which is right next door to New Orleans. And when it comes to cities, and they went to a high school that was called Riverdale, and it was in like I said, Metairie slash New Orleans, Louisiana, however you want to call it. The best way I can explain it is New Orleans slash outskirts of New Orleans, right next to it. But there was this high school called Riverdale High, and there was this group of guys. They were white dudes, and they were fighting other dudes. Of course, in the 90s, everybody had friends and everybody had enemies. This particular group of dudes had some enemies who they would get in fights with, and they would go back and forth. And listen, it wasn't all white dudes. They hung out with black dudes too, right? But it was mostly white dudes in this particular little crew. So when they would fight other dudes throughout. Anyway, one day the Riverdale High School got invited to go on a local black radio station. I think it was FM 98. I don't remember. It was back in the 90s. I don't think it was Q93. I think it's another station similar to Q93. And so the white dudes went on there. And at this time, the band or the rap group Onyx was out, and they had the slam, da 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 da. You know the song. If you're not, go check it out, Onyx Slam. Anyway, that group Onyx was out, and a lot of people was liking what they were doing. They were bringing a lot of rough, crazy, kind of like headbanger type atmosphere to rap music. Well, these particular dudes, were influenced by Onyx. So they all shaved their heads bald. Well, when they walked on, the high school was, because they would give shout outs. When Riverdale High School walked on to the set of the disc jockey show, which like I said, I think it was FM 98. They walked in on the show, or 85. I don't remember. It was mostly a rap station. It was anyway. They had this high school on for the shout out, and a bunch of the dudes who went were from this group of dudes. And when they walked in the radio station, the disc jockey said, "Oh, we got the snowmen in the house," because it was white dudes with shaved heads. Well, when they went back to school the next day, everybody started calling them the snowmen. And this was in the summer in New Orleans. There ain't no snow in New Orleans, period, but they got the nickname the snowmen. So the name snowmen stuck. Listen, now I'm going to get into my involvement with the snowmen. I wasn't a part of that initial group that got called the snowmen. I wound up working with some of the dudes who were part of that group and got introduced to that group. And then I got basically initiated, not jumped in, none of that stuff. I was just cool with them. They like me, I like them. So next thing you know, I'm repping snowmen. So I'm in the snowmen. Well, the initial group of guys, they were about fighting and everything. But there was another smaller group of guys within the original snowmen who weren't just about fighting, but they were about that boom, 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 gunplay, right? And they were about stick ups and they were about dealing. They wanted to, bring this thing to the next level. So anyway, the snowmen began to get into a lot of trouble. So some of the dudes who was in this original snowmen wound up being going to jail. A lot of the original dudes went to LTI, that's the Louisiana Training Institution, and they handled their business up the road, got in fights. If you know anything about juvenile detention in Louisiana, is brutal. It's just every single day fight, 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 fight. My brother was up there. My brother was snowman. My a bunch of my partners were up there. They were in the snowman. As you can see, it's behind me. It's snowing in New Orleans right now, which is very rare. So I felt like, and I never talk about this gang, never, because I don't like talking about my past a lot. But now that I have the pen and the shank, this channel, I want to share these stories with you. So anyway, the snowmen wind up being formed, and that was a gang in the 1990s. A bunch, mostly, it was I would say it was probably about 95% white, but we had some Spanish and black dudes that were in our set that chilled with us. That people would say they were affiliates with the Snowmen, but it was mostly white, young white thugs from the New Orleans area. And so that was the story of the Snowmen, and that's how the Snowmen came about. Now, the Snowmen were also on the news and in the newspaper probably about, I would say, a handful of times, 3 or 4 or 5 times they were in the news and newspaper for shootings and things that they were involved in. And back in the 90s, the Jefferson Parish Police Department did what they had a gang task force because there was a big issue with teenage gangs in New Orleans in the 90s. We don't have Crips and Bloods here, but we would jump. A lot of people would jump claiming that, and I eventually got involved in that too. But the original gang that I was in, the one that I'm most known for, is the Snowmen. That's right. It was the SMC, which stood for Snowmen Crew. So I was part of the Snowmen Crew. And so I was recently talking to another partner of mine who was not a member of the Snowmen, but he was vicious in his own right. Actually, one of the solid dudes that I personally knew. And I was talking to him, and we were talking about how his name was actually on the gang list for the Snowman, but he wasn't never actually a snowman. And I actually personally tried to get him taken. I told the police, I said, man, y'all down bad for putting him on the gang list as a snowman because he wasn't really a snowman, right? So anyway, he got affiliated with us, even though he really wasn't with us. Hey, I wish he would have been with us because it's my boy. He handles his business, right? But he wasn't. He's still my partner. Still would have rolled with him back in the day. We was cool. So that's the story of Snowman. And look, I want to take a moment. Some of the members who were in the Snowman aren't with us today. There's a handful of them who didn't make it. They actually passed away. For whatever reason. We ain't gonna get into all that. And there's some that I don't even communicate with to this day. There's a few dudes that I still communicate with. I talk to here and there. You know what I mean? But most of them I'm disassociated with, and most of them I still got love for. Some of them I've had issues with. Actual members. We were all members. And but I just want to shout y'all out. Y'all know who y'all are. Y'all my people still. Y'all my partners. We did our thing back here in New Orleans when we were teenagers, and here we are today. But what better time to tell you the story of the New Orleans snowmen than when it's actually snowing in New Orleans, man? You can't make this stuff up. It was the perfect time for me to do two rare things: talk about me being in a gang called the Snowmen and having it snow in New Orleans. So I had to share that. And the snowman, let me tell you something. I'm gonna tell you a story real quick about the snowman. This is one. Actually, my partner I was talking to recently. I'm gonna give him a shout out. Morgan was happening, man. This is a shout out to you. You need to check him out. He does some good stuff, content too. I'm going to get it out there for y'all. But I was talking to him, and we was talking about the story when a partner of his, dude we know, he got shot. Well, he got shot by a dude who was in a snowman at a party that I was at. So I was at this party, and it started when dudes was gonna crowd me because they were like, "Oh, the snowman in our house," because we rolled up in two different cars and we were bumping that Attack of the Ballheads by Onyx, Attack of the Ballheads, and we were playing that. We walked into the party, and I'm about to fight these dudes, right? And I get surrounded. And we outnumbered probably for every one of us. They probably had about 10 of them. And so we actually inside the house party, and a couple of my partners, they get out the front door, but I get crowded. So I'm getting crowded. I get crowded around. I can't get out. There's dudes everywhere around me. And so I'm in the back of the wall, and I got my hands up. And next thing you know, a fight starts breaking out. I'm getting whooped. When my partner, Ryan, I ain't gonna say his last name, he pulls out his pistol. He starts shooting. Thank God he shot with a smaller caliber. We had multiple guns that day, but we only brought one in the party. It was a smaller caliber. The other ones were in the car. And so when I'm getting jumped, he's trying to start pulling people off me at first, but then he started getting bang, bang, bang. They started banging him up too. So he pulled out his boom, 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 and he starts blasting. You know what I mean? Well, long story short, a handful of people get shot, and people wind up in the hospital. Cops wind up involved. My partner gets arrested. You know what I mean? I appreciate what he did. He stood down with me. You know what I mean? Honestly, he could have hit me because he was just shooting wild in the crowd. And I was in it too. Dudes would just, man, I remember when he started blasting, dudes just got off me because I was getting jumped. Man, there was so many people that were jumping me that they really wasn't effective because nobody couldn't get no real punches. It was inside of a house. So it was just like nobody was really hurting me because there was just no room to even stand up and really get busy. So it was just stupid altogether. But we were dumb anyway. We were stupid idiots. Anyway, that's the story of the snowman, and I finally shared it. One of the 1990 New Orleans white gangs on the outskirts of New Orleans, the Snowman Crew. Anyway, give me a like and subscribe, and thanks for watching The Pen and the Shank.